Let's be very clear about something. The rule of law is no longer operative in America, at least for a small selection of some of us. Instead of the rule of law, Donald has replaced it with loyalty, not to the Constitution of the United States of America, not to the country itself, but to himself. In this regime, the Department of Justice is no longer an institution meant to serve the rule of law or the American people. It is merely an enforcement arm for his agenda and his personal vendettas. Take a look at this clip of Attorney General Pam Bondi.
As we've been on the air, the Attorney General is announcing the Trump administration is now filing charges against the state of New York and its top officials. Why? Watch this.
New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops today. New York didn't listen. So now you're next.
Ooh, I think somebody should rip that cross off of her neck. Yeah, that's not how it's supposed to work. New York gets to make its own rules regarding how it treats its citizens, its immigrants. And that kind of thuggish threatening behavior does not play well with us in New York City. We've seen a lot of corruption before, most of it committed by Donald Trump, actually, in the last 60 years or so. But now he is using the power bestowed upon him by a woefully misguided or just deeply cruel plurality of the American electorate to weaponize the Department of Justice in order to pursue his perceived political enemies and other enemies. And in this case, even sanctuary cities, because cities like New York are not willing to play by their grotesque rules, which we know are going to end up getting a lot of people hurt. Also, I forgot to say this, there is no such thing as an illegal person, so please stop that. Normally, this kind of behavior would be challenged, but by whom? Bondi just illuminated an open for business sign, basically letting other corrupt, vicious people know that as long as you align yourself with Donald and the Trump regime's agenda, you can get whatever you want. They'll interfere with cases, they'll sell justice to the highest bidder, or they'll strong arm states and cities into doing their bidding. And right now, one of the beneficiaries of that is the woefully, deeply corrupt Democratic mayor of New York City, Eric Adams. See, anybody from either party can be corrupt. I give you another example, Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, who was convicted of just like a bizarre range of corruption and was sentenced to 11 years in prison. You want to make a bet that within the not too distant future, he also goes crawling to Mar-a-Lago like Eric Adams did to get a pardon or some other favor from Donald Trump. Eric Adams' case, though, is quite something. The levels of corruption were not just his personal corruption, but the corruption between him and the Department of Justice and Emil Bove, who is a deputy attorney general, and let us not forget this, was one of Donald's personal defense attorneys during one of his many, many trials. I've lost count. I believe it was the election fraud case involving the hush money payments to a porn actor. I'm pretty sure at this point that Emil Bove is still Donald's personal defense attorney. It's just that he's doing that as a deputy attorney general of the United States. Bove, who is just one of the, such an obviously weak, pathetic man who got drunk on his proximity to power. Like, that's my only explanation for that guy. He ordered the Southern District of New York to drop its federal corruption case against New York Mayor Adams. The reason, not because Adams is not guilty or innocent, he is definitely, definitely guilty. Just want to be clear about something. DAs do not go after high profile people unless they have a case nailed down. They just do not do that, which is why the fact that Jack Smith got stopped before the first hurdle will go down as one of the greatest tragedies in modern American history. No. Bove asked the SDNY to drop the case because Donald needs Adams to do his bidding on immigration. This wasn't a legal decision, it was a transaction. And as you know, Donald Trump is probably the most transactional creature ever to live. It was a backroom deal in which Adams' cooperation on mass deportations in New York City, of all places, bought him his get out of jail free card from federal prosecution. Here's Adams doing some quite high skilled bootlicking.
So I thank the Justice Department for its honesty. Now we can put this cruel episode behind us and focus entirely on the future of our city. It's time to move forward.
Oh, God, fuck all the way off. I mean, it shouldn't surprise us that somebody as corrupt as Adams is would be able to lie like that with such condescension, such arrogance, knowing full well everything he did. We're not moving forward from this. Are you kidding? We're just starting. And unfortunately, this is the first domino in what is likely going to be the entire dismantling of what was heretofore one of the premier institutions in this country, the Department of Justice. Danielle Sassoon, the acting U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York, refused to participate in this charade. By the way, Donald appointed her. She resigned instead, which is what you do under such circumstances. And then, because this is how it goes, they went to the next person, the next person, the next person. So far, 6 other federal prosecutors involved in this have also resigned, unwilling to put their names to what Sassoon called, quote, a breathtaking and dangerous precedent, unquote. Here's Ellie Honig, a senior legal analyst for CNN, explaining what happened.
These resignations were courageous and necessary moves. It was the only right and principled and ethical move by all of them. All of them were faced with really a prosecutor's nightmare scenario. They were given a direct order from the DOJ bosses to dismiss a perfectly legitimate indictment before it ever saw a trial jury for purely overtly political reasons.
Yeah, let's put this into perspective. The Southern District of New York is historically one of the most powerful and independent legal institutions in the entire country. It is so powerful and independent, in fact, it is known colloquially as the Sovereign District of New York. The best of the best go to work at SDNY. This is the office that took down people like Michael Cohen and investigated Jeffrey Epstein, and they prosecuted Wall Street frauds. But now, under Donald's DOJ, the top prosecutors at SDNY, again, among the best of the best in the country, are resigning rather than complying with the directive that Sassoon said was rooted in outright corruption. What was Bove's response? Well, he placed prosecutors on administrative leave, as you do when you have a very weak hand and the backing of the most corrupt person in American history. And he did this because they're refusing to fall in line. This, my friends, is what they call a purge. This is happening in agencies throughout the federal government, but this one is deeply troubling in a completely different way because it suggests, again, that there is no longer a rule of law in America, at least for the people who most need to be held to account. course, this is not just about Adams. It is about setting a precedent. And let's start here. Adams wasn't just in some legal trouble. It's not like he just, had a lot of unpaid parking tickets or anything. He was in very serious legal trouble. They had him dead to rights. Federal prosecutors accused him of soliciting campaign donations from Turkish officials. I don't think Turkish officials are, New Yorkers. Maybe I'm wrong. Americans in geography, not so much. He also was accused of taking over $120,000 in travel perks and directing aides, this is a big one, to destroy evidence and lie to the FBI. Typically, the FBI doesn't like that sort of thing, but I'm pretty sure Kash Patel would be totally cool with it. Until last week, Adams was facing new federal charges that prosecutors were preparing to file in a superseding indictment. And then, just like that, the case disappeared. Just days before, Adams suddenly reversed course on immigration, pledging loyalty to Donald's hardline policies. So, by the way, he wasn't pardoned and the case wasn't dismissed. SDNY was ordered to dismiss it. Thus far, it's in limbo. Not to worry, though. Emil Bove and his cabal at DOJ will finally find somebody at SDNY to do whatever they tell them to do. So, anyway, here we have Eric Adams, not indicted, but yet not having his case dismissed yet, pledging loyalty to Donald's hardline immigration policies as mayor of New York City, a sanctuary city, where we do not believe in employing hardline anti-immigrant policies. So what changed? What a good question. One thing. Adams decided to become a key player in Donald's immigration crackdown because Donald was offering Adams immunity and impunity, which are two things that Donald is quite familiar with because he's been granted them for far too long. Adams, in a grotesque turn for a Democratic mayor of New York City, started working with Donald's border czar, the absolutely awful Tom Homan, who was a fascist in charge of mass deportations. Now, that's all changing.
Mayor Adams meeting with border czar Tom Homan in Lower Manhattan yesterday, where they talked about removing violent migrant gangs from New York City. In a major policy shift, as you said, Adams then announced that, he would issue an executive order allowing ICE agents on Rikers Island. For 2 decades, ICE agents were allowed to operate at Rikers until the city passed sanctuary city laws in 2014, banning officers from the jail complex. A provision in one of those laws permits Adams to issue that executive order so long as it's, quote, for purposes unrelated to the enforcement of civil immigration laws. And so the mayor seems to have found a loophole there, saying the order is necessary to get dangerous people off the streets. Adams and Homan also discussed surging more NYPD detectives into federal task forces targeting gang violence and getting back some of the $80 million the Trump administration revoked for migrant housing. In an interview on WABC Radio's Katz and Cosby, Adams made it clear he wants to work with the new administration. His comments, though, coming days after the Justice Department ordered federal prosecutors to drop the corruption charges against him.
Okay, this is a blatant quid pro quo. I'm going to talk more about what that means in a minute. But the idea that their goal here is to get dangerous people off the streets and Tom Homan and Eric Adams are still roaming around free suggests to me that it's not working. Former mayor of New York, also not a great mayor, but not nearly as bad as Eric Adams is making Bill de Blasio look good in retrospect. De Blasio and City Council Speaker Adrian Adams argued that Eric Adams lacks the legal authority to override sanctuary laws via executive order, setting the stage for yet another legal battle. On February 14th, Adams went on Fox and Friends, as we saw, with Homan, and basically, just ceded all sorts of ground to the guy who is running the Trump regime's deportation machine. He just sat there while Homan threatened him on live television. And according to a recent report in Newsweek, today he may have admitted to that very quid pro quo on national television. Take a look.
If he doesn't come through,
you're up early anyway.
if he doesn't come through, I'll be back in New York City,
Right.
and we won't be sitting on the couch. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, "Where the hell is the agreement we came to?" So,
And I want ICE to deliver. And I want ICE to deliver. We're going to deliver for the safety of the people of this city.
Yeah, we're going to deliver for the safety of me, while that guy threatens me in ways not at all subtle. He didn't object. He didn't flinch. It was a hostage video. I mean, I do not feel sorry for Eric Adams at all. I mean, good. However, the outcome of this is going to be absolutely awful. Because now he owes Donald everything, including his freedom. Of course, Adams is vehemently denying that this is actually what's happening. Take a look.
Well, Mayor, let's
Say grenade.
let's talk a little bit about. You've been in the news all week.
Yes.
The Department of Justice dropped the criminal corruption charges against you. The U.S. attorney here in New York City, the Southern District, she quit yesterday. The acting U.S. attorney, and so did 5 members of the Department of Justice because they felt like being forced by the Department of Justice to drop the corruption charges was inappropriate and they should not have asked. And what she said was, you offered to help with the migration problem and the immigration agenda in exchange for the case being dropped.
Think about that. Think about my attorney, Alex Spira, one of the top trial attorneys in the country. Imagine him going inside saying that the only way Mayor Adams is going to assist in immigration, which I was calling for since 2022, right, is if you drop the charges. That's quid pro quo. That's a crime.
It took her
it took her 3 weeks to report in front of her a criminal action. Right. Come on, this is silly.
Oh, so silly. Yes, you know why I can imagine it? Because that's what happened. It was quid pro quo of the worst possible kind. The rot here is so deep and so extensive. I do not know that the DOJ recovers from this, and we are just at the beginning of things. But let's get to the other very serious point here. Eric Adams is no longer mayor of New York City. For reasons I don't begin to understand, a lot of New Yorkers voted for him, which is why he got into office in the first place. But he is no longer in charge. He is no longer doing the will of the people of New York City. Donald Trump has this scumbag on a leash. And as soon as Eric Adams steps out of line, he's going to feel that leash tighten around his neck. Donald Trump has no business being mayor of New York City, besides the fact that we fucking hate him. This is not how this works. So a line has been crossed here. Governor Kathy Hochul has the authority given to her by the New York State Constitution to get rid of Eric Adams. She can terminate his mayorship. Do it now, Governor Hochul. This cannot wait. This is a 5-alarm fire. Way too many people are going to suffer at the hands of this other criminal because he cares more about himself and his personal safety and his freedom and his power and his ambition than he does about the people he was sworn in to serve. And again, he's not even serving them anymore anyway. Governor Hochul, exercise your authority, terminate Eric Adams' mayorship, please. Thank you. This is bad, obviously, but it's just a symptom. The disease, Well, the disease is Donald, obviously, but that disease is spreading like wildfire, and now the DOJ has caught it. I want to take a second and look at Danielle Sassoon, the prosecutor who resigned rather than go against everything she believes in and everything she has worked for her entire life. And basically, that sums up the quandary pretty much every single civil servant who's not willing to go along with this horror, I should say, is in. All right, so to know how bad this is, Danielle Sassoon is not a Democratic operative. She clerked for Antonin Scalia. She's a Federalist Society member. She prosecuted Sam Bankman-Fried and mob bosses before taking over SDNY. And she just started again. She's appointed by Donald. In her resignation letter, she called out Donald's DOJ for using prosecutions as political leverage. She accused Emil Bove of pressuring her office to dismiss a case without reviewing the evidence. Seems like a weird thing for a lawyer to skip over. And she confirmed that Adams' lawyers repeatedly urged, this is a quote, repeatedly urged what amounted to a quid pro quo, indicating that Adams would be in a position to assist with the department's enforcement priorities only if the indictment were dismissed, unquote. Why would she lie? Let's be clear here. This is not speculation. Bove's own DOJ memo said they were dropping the case because Adams needed to, quote, focus on immigration, unquote. As CNN reported, Bove directed prosecutors to drop the case as soon as practicable, citing the fact that the prosecution unduly restricted Mayor Adams' ability to devote full attention and resources to the illegal immigration and violent crime that it said rose under the Biden administration. Okay, let's say for the sake of argument it did. I don't think that's the case. Who cares? That is not what you do to get your way. We get to make those decisions. And if we don't get to make those decisions because our mayor is so corrupt and so beholden to the people holding the other end of his leash, then we are no longer sovereign. The SDNY is no longer sovereign. And then where are we? So what does this mean going forward? None of this is normal. Absolutely none of this is normal. This is the weaponization of the rule of law of the Department of Justice. Now, one of the reasons that might make your head explode is because Donald Trump has been lying about that for years. Using that phrase, drilling it into people's heads so they think there's something corrupt going on at the DOJ, and he's had a lot of help too. Now it's actually true. And they're doing it to us, to our rule of law, to our DOJ. The Department of Justice is no longer independent. Prosecutions are not decided by law, but by their political usefulness to the regime. Bribery is effectively legal, depending on who you're bribing and who you are. Donald literally suspended the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which bans U.S. companies from bribing foreign officials. Can't imagine why. Law enforcement is being purged. Prosecutors who refuse to play along, who refuse to betray their oaths to the Constitution of the United States of America, are being fired or forced to resign. Also, we now know that the Attorney General of the United States is working hand in hand with the White House to prosecute prosecutors who were doing their jobs and trying to hold Donald Trump accountable. This is how authoritarian works. This is how all of this starts, by turning justice into a political weapon and rewarding those who submit. We are just 25 days into the first 100 days of the Trump regime. If this is what's happening now, if this is what Donald is doing now, I promise you, by the time we get to day 100, we will no longer recognize our country.
Please take a second and like and share this video. Be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.